Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You tuned in to LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective. So let's get right to this show. In this show, we're going to be starting our series around the black tax education. We're in the commencement season where a lot of graduates at all different levels are getting on to the next level and getting out there and starting their lives. And I particularly want to give a shout out to all the graduates, HBCUs, but particularly my undergrad alma mater, the Lincoln University of Pennsylvania, which on this day that we're recording this broadcast, they had their commencement for 2020 and 2021. Yesterday actually was 2020, and then today 2021, because obviously for the pandemic. But it just gets you the understanding of how important education is and what it means to us culturally as a community, and what it just means in general to be able to move forward and have upward mobility in this society. So, ClaVille, let's talk a little bit about all the different levels what we're going to try to hit on doing this series, the black tax education.
Yeah. So, well, again, I like to also say congratulations to all the graduates who have graduated this season. Of course, many universities were holding double graduations for 2020.
That's right.
So 2021, because we know the pandemic pretty much provided a very solemn end to everyone's year, academic year, and especially our seniors that graduated. So congratulations to my alma mater, Southern University A&M College, and Southern University Law Center, and also where I'm at, where I hail now from the Spartan Nation, Norfolk State University. The Black Tax series that we're discussing at LaVeist and ClaVille, as we delve into education, we understand that when we as African Americans venture into anything that is going to better us in America, is going to better ourselves, better our communities, better our families, generations to come, there's an extra added tax to it.
That's right. That's the reality. That's what happens.
It is reality. And, one thing that 2020 has shown us is that all these things that we've been talking about as African Americans in our stories and also showing evidence, finally, the pandemic unveiled it all.
Exacerbated it. Accelerated. I mean, it really laid it bare, the disparities that are out here, and education is certainly one of them.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we're talking about education, but I just want to make this comment by Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci testified and said we have to understand that the disparities in healthcare and the disparities in the vaccine was exposed and due to racism. This came out of Dr. Fauci's own mouth at a testimony on Capitol Hill. He was not pressured to say that. He didn't have to say it.
Right.
But from his observation as a scientist, as a researcher, which we know scientists and researchers follow the evidence.
Absolutely.
So it shows that racism was indeed the cause of these health disparities. So with that being the point, Will, it's the same as it relates to education. So let's take a look at higher ed. In higher ed, we're talking about graduation. Many times, African Americans have to take out more loans to pay for college than our white counterparts.
Absolutely. My God. I think.
And we still haven't gotten student loan debt relief yet, but go ahead.
We still haven't gotten the relief. Biden is still, sort of hemming and hawing about really putting forth a relief package that would really make an impact. I think he's been talking about 10 or maybe 15 grand as opposed to
10,000 plus
10. Plus, that's right. As opposed to 50,000 or 100,000 or somewhere around where the average is. I believe the average for a lot of students is somewhere around approaching 30,000 in that range. So again, when you don't come from a legacy of wealth, as is the case for many African-American families, because of the disparities, because of the discrimination, because of the being prevented from having opportunities to things like we've talked about before, home ownership, business ownership, of investing in the market, you end up in a situation where in order to finance your education, you've got to go and take out loans. So we get loans, we come out, like many of the students coming out today, overburdened with a lot of loan debt, which now begins to impact your decisions when it comes to what type of job you can get to really advance your career. Can you get a car? Are you going to be able to buy a home? All of these kinds of things. So we're going to delve into that and talk about higher ed and this student loan situation, which is totally out of control.
Absolutely. And when we talk about student loan, I mean, you hit the nail on the head as it relates to impacting your future decisions.
Right.
And when we talk about student loans, we're also looking at not just government loans, but we're looking at private loans and how the private loan industry is really taking advantage of individuals who have to rely upon those loans. So the question becomes, if a school outpaces the amount of federal guaranteed loans, is it pushing too high? Or are the federal student loan programs outdated and should, of course, follow where tuition goes? So there is that discussion there. So in addition to the Black tax, and we're looking at student loans as relates to education, also look at the type of degrees. Now, many times we're told, Will, that you have to get this degree in order to apply for this job or to be considered for this job.
Right.
Many times, many African Americans are going back, getting advanced degrees just to get the same job that their white counterparts have with a bachelor's degree. Happens all the
time. Which you hit on a point of oftentimes, again, because education was often denied us, our parents instilled in us oftentimes education is the key to liberation, upward mobility. We've, in our particular generation, being Gen Xers and baby boomers and the next generation, we've been encouraged to get education to the point where a lot of times we are overeducated.
Yeah.
So we over-rely on education. And then a lot of times you come out with all of these additional degrees. And I see two things have happened. The time that you spent putting all this energy getting that degree, it could have been spent in many cases putting that energy into wealth building or building a business or building something that's really going to accumulate wealth, right? Oftentimes, so you put the energy into getting the degree. Then when you get the degree, you still oftentimes may not be looking at a high enough paying job that can offset the cost of getting the degree, as we just talked about student loans. Then there's another element that happens in there. Oftentimes, you get these degrees, and now you're thinking that, well, I did what I was supposed to do to get these degrees, be certified, be educated, be legitimized. Mm-hmm. And then you find out oftentimes that now people consider you to be overqualified, or people start to use that as an excuse. Now you are someone to be feared because now you have all these different degrees. And so you hear things like, and I'm sure that you experience this as I have, Eric, folks saying, oh, okay, so I got to call you doctor now.
Right.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Well, I did earn it, right? I mean, this is what I was supposed to do, right? Would you have preferred that I went and caught a case and ended up in prison? Is that? I mean, so you start to get those kinds of comments. So now you become overqualified, and now you're someone to be feared. And unfortunately, that happens oftentimes. It's not just with white America; it happens with Black America. You find yourself in a situation with your own folks, your own people, and now you're someone to be, you're someone to be feared. You're someone to be knocked down.
Right. It's funny you mentioned that because I remember I was at church, and the church I went to in college, and one of the brothers looked at me and said, I guess I got to give you your respect now. I said, well, I'm not graduating.
You gotta now.
What are you talking about? So again, people harbor these animosities, like you said. It's just not in outside of our community, but it's also in our community. But the difference with it being outside of our community is that these are the communities that can open up opportunities and close opportunities. Right. So you mentioned being overeducated. We see where we're told, as I said before, in order to be considered for this position, you got to get this degree or experience. So I can't get experience if I can't get be considered. So let me get the degree, because you'll see 3 to 5 years experience or a master's degree or a degree in this area. So many African Americans, because those doors are closed, they end up going to get an advanced degree. But then you come back and they say, oh, well, like you said, you're overqualified. So it's continuing to move the mark. And I'll give this example. I'll use this example that we see in the NFL. You have African American coaches that want to break into coaching. Right. And they're told, oh, well, you need to get this experience as a position coach, right? So you get onto a staff where you're able to work as a position coach, running backs coach, wide receiver coach, offensive line, defensive line, tight end, whatever the case may be, special teams. Right. Then they say, well, you don't have enough experience at a coordinator position. So now you become offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, you're calling the shots and so forth. Right. And they say, well, I know you're an offensive coordinator of the highest scoring offense in the history of the NFL, and I know you won a Super Bowl, but did you call all the plays, right? It's like how many times are you going to move the goalposts on me? How many times are you going to move it? But then you have your white counterparts who are now getting opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and leaving a worse opportunity, getting better opportunities after recording a worse record than they came into. In other words, getting hired up. Getting hired up, even though you're a loser, saying, oh, he's a great guy, or he just needs the right situation to be successful. Well, what about us? We need a situation. And when we get into those situations, and let's just say we don't end up winning as much as we should also get another opportunity. The NBA has done it. You see Doc Rivers, I'll use him for an example. Phenomenal coach, went to the Celtics, won a title, got hired with the Clippers, put them on the map. You and I remember the Clippers before. The Clippers going all the way back to, where were they? Weren't they in Kansas City at one time? Or they were in Buffalo. I'm starting to date myself. They were just different franchises that just and changed their names over the years that just never did well. But you're right. Here he comes and he actually puts them on the map. He actually has some success with them. Absolutely. And then immediately he's hired up. After he's let go like the next day. To Philadelphia. So these are the opportunities when we talk about education that we look and say, hey, we just simply need the opportunity and the support in order to get to achieve what we need to achieve. The other part of education, the black tax, when we take a look at higher ed, we want to take a look at the professorships. Right. Now, keep in mind, now, Will, both of you and I are HBCU undergraduate graduates, but we also are PWI graduates of graduate degrees. Right. University of Arizona Masters, Old Dominion University, doctorates. I got to give a shout out. Those are my other alma maters. Absolutely. That I love. Right. And, my graduate school alma mater is Louisiana State University, also known as LSU. And in those programs, we see that in a lot of those schools, you only have one black professor. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, if you look at a law school and you have a what they call top tier law schools, which I don't like the tier ranking. But if you look very closely, you'll see a lot of the white professors who were there. They're non-black. Mm-hmm. A lot of white professors went to the state university of that particular school. Right. And they simply have, their undergraduate and law degree, and they're professors. If you look at the black professors, they usually have Ivy League law degrees. Really? As a matter of fact, when I was looking at law schools and considering law schools, of course, I put the law schools in my area on the list. So I went to go sit in the class over at LSU Law School, and they set me in the class of the only Black law professor there,
Really?
at the university undergrad.
Why did they do that? Why did they do that, Eric?
Whose mom was the was the history, one of the history professors there, and he went to Yale to get his law degree. He came back, and he's a professor at LSU. Was a professor at LSU at the time. He was the only Black professor there. Everyone else went to like LSU, got their law degree, whatever the case may be. He went to Yale, and he was the only Black professor at that time there for what we call doctrinal courses. And I'm sitting in this class, and I'm sitting with one of my former classmates who graduated a year before me, and we're sitting at the top of the class. There's 125 students in there, lecture hall. There's like 3 Blacks sitting in the class,
right?
Not including me. I think I made 4. But you're looking around and you're saying these are the games that are being played, right? And that's the Black tax when we talk about being able to get access to these institutions with a lot of resources, and in order to teach students and also to teach African American students. Keep in mind, a lot of these institutions too, they hire that Black professor, and they expect that Black professor to publish, to research, to go to conferences,
right,
which is part of tenure. But they also tax them to be the special advisor and only advisor for Black students, which they get compensated for.
Right.
So therefore, you have another Black tax.
Yeah, because it's very similar to oftentimes what happens in my profession that I spent almost 20 years, well, 20 plus years in journalism.
Wow.
And as a Black journalist, again, you are also expected to address, and you want to, on one level, you want to address those issues that particularly impact your community. But you don't want to be pigeonholed only into those issues that impact your community. You want the freedom to really be able to explore all of your interests. And so that is something that happens. Again, as you are educated, because of who you are, you often get perceived and you get pigeonholed. You could get pigeonholed, or you could get directed into a particular area that limits the full scope of what you would like to do. Now, again, so that's a dynamic that happens. As an educated African American, you absolutely, many of us, I know I do, I'm sure, and I know that you do, knowing you well, we absolutely want to do work that particularly benefits our community.
Absolutely.
But you also want to do work that benefits all community. You want that full scope to be able to be all in touch in all kinds of areas that you can. Just like your white counterparts have that freedom to do that. So you still run the issue of not being seen fully whole, fully as a full scholar. You can run that risk. That can be a tax that comes along with it. We're also going to be talking about K through 12. One of the issues that is very prominent and that the pandemic again brought out, it was the big issue of children not in school. What is going to happen with children missing school, falling behind, all of these other issues that can really impact a child's intellectual development. We know there's a correlation between education at a young age and mastering certain skills. And there's a correlation that failure to master certain skills can easily put you in that crib to prison pipeline. So the pandemic has really exacerbated that. One of the big issues for African American children, studies have shown, is that oftentimes lower expectations are put upon African American children by teachers who, in many of these public school systems, are majority white.
Yeah.
So here we all know how our teachers, certain teachers we can point to who really inspired us, who really challenged us to be everything that we could be to reach our potential. You sitting in a classroom as a child with a teacher who has low expectations of you. Oftentimes, children, they're going to do what children do. They're going to gravitate and perform to those expectations. They want to have fun. They want to be with their friends. They're not thinking about all of the importance of all of the intellectual development and the challenges here for them and how it is going to impact how they develop. So if you got your child in a classroom with a teacher that has low expectations, that also oftentimes is going to lead to lower results. And we see that happening with Black children all the time.
Well, you're exactly right. There's a lot of issues that have been, again, the pandemic has shown us this. The pandemic was terrible, absolutely terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was any good that came out of it,
and it's still terrible, it's still here with us, and it may creep back on. It may pull us back into another lockdown situation. We don't know.
Well, but let's hope we don't get there. Yeah. If we had that much trouble, getting people to wear masks, which is common sense, listen, don't even get me started. We're staying on black tax with the education, but if we're looking at what the pandemic uncovered, mm-hmm. there's no more excuse for us not to address these issues. In education, and I always take the disposition, my purpose as an educator is not to make things more complex,
right?
Make the most complex things more simplistic. Exactly. And also to give you not just the tools, but the encouragement in order to be able to understand. So that you can now take the information in which you've learned and use it for your benefit.
Right, apply it and continue to seek information on your own. Be autodidactic. Yes, absolutely.
And when we start to lecture parents and communities, they say, "Oh, you should have this and you should have that." But the pandemic showed us that our communities are working and really, if you're working 2 jobs, you're also doing a gig job, part time, just to make what the unemployment benefits were being allowed during the pandemic. So they don't have the resources. They don't have the resources to provide the internet capability. Listen, we had to pivot, in our home. We had to pivot to have 4 working areas. So we had office spaces that were already here. We created a couple more. We were able to get the kids whatever they needed.
Right.
They were able to give a call. We were able to increase our Wi-Fi, get food all over the place, the whole nine. That all happened within 1 weekend.
Right.
Okay. So we were fortunate enough to have the resources to do that, to pivot to extracurricular activities from inside to outside. Where the team shut down, we were able to hire private instructors for them.
Right.
And tutors and the whole nine.
But what happens to a family that doesn't have those resources and
my point exactly.
Even that dexterity to think and say, "Hey, we've got to make this extra step for our children." If you may think that this is what you want to do, but if you don't have the resources to actually execute it,
have it. Absolutely. So, with our schools, we have to ensure that we are providing the families with resources that they need, and the families also understand that these resources are being provided. The other aspect of the education in K through 12 is where we take a look at the tax base for our schools. We still, in many areas of our country, we still determine the level of education and the resources in large part by the tax base around it. So therefore, if you're in the area, and of course, these are considered various title schools, where certain federal funds are allocated because they're in areas that don't have the resources, the tax base, the companies, the real estate tax, and the like.
Right.
And of course, now you as an educator in an urban school district or a community that has lacked those resources are now taxed to achieve a level of success and testing level in producing future leaders in meeting these marks without financial resources, the taxpayer can do it. Again, saying, and then others have the nerve to turn around after they leave the community, after they suck the community dry, after they place stores in the community, but take the money out of the community, don't reinvest it, in the community because they don't live in that community to turn around and wag their fingers and say, look at you. Why can't you do X, Y, Z? My question is, if you reverse that scenario and remove that tax base, remove those resources, remove those dollars that circulate over and over and over in your community,
right,
would you achieve better?
Yeah, and we know those of us who buy homes, whether we have children or not, one of the things that we look at in order to make a decision on buying home, what's the quality of schools?
100%.
So
100%.
when your schools in your neighborhood are not of that high quality, it becomes a disincentive for people who have resources, who could build up the tax base, who actually could contribute to the community in positive ways that benefit everyone in the community, makes them less likely to want to come into that community. So
Absolutely.
These issues, what we're going to be doing in this series is connecting the dots and looking at how these issues really interact and how they really play out in people's lives in real ways. Oftentimes, again, you hear on these shows or you hear in the media talking points, and people are just kind of repeating the same old tropes, the same old stereotypes.
Absolutely.
But what we want to do in this series is to really point out and pull in studies and point out and show how these dots connect and how they make real world impact on your life, and what are the kinds of things that we can actually do, like a solution you just brought up. What are the kinds of things that we can actually do to turn this thing around to make for a better community for all our children and for our entire country? What we can really do to make a difference, because we're all interconnected. That's another thing that the pandemic has shown. We're all interconnected, and we need each other to circulate and to improve our society in general.
Well, I want to point out one more aspect of the Black tax in K through 12. In K through 12, when you go to various schools, and let's just say it's a school that's slightly integrated, right? Because we know that the code language for it's a good school means that it's not as integrated as we want it to be. But when you go to a school that's slightly integrated, the Black teachers are also now taxed with educating as they would their other counterparts, with getting test scores where they need to be at, like their other counterparts, meetings and conferences, but also the discipline of Black students.
And by the way, Black teachers are only 7% in the country. Majority of teachers in the country, 80% of them are white. So to your point, you got a small percentage that's being overtaxed to address other issues, as well, that are directly related to curriculum and education.
And not just white, but they're also overwhelmingly white female as well. So now you have a perspective of our society being educated by white females, but that's another discussion from another.
Right. It's not that there's something wrong with white females at all.
Absolutely.
But when you say that over-representation, what is being missed when you don't have the balance? But take us on home. We're coming towards the end of our hour. Well, our half hour.
Well, look, every time we start to get into a great discussion, our time comes to an end. But again, we'd like to thank all of you who enjoy LaVeist and ClaVille. We thank you for tuning in. For those of you that want to tune in again, you can watch the rerun or you can pass it on to a friend. You can like, share, follow us on Facebook, all of our social media, Instagram and Twitter. And also, we want to encourage you to not just like and share, but we also encourage you to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Give us comments. What do you like about LaVeist and ClaVille? Let us know how we can improve it. I'd like to give a shout out to our producer, Ben Bailey, who does all of our production and our graphics. Hats off to him.
Big Ben.
Absolutely. So until we meet again, to us, that's the way it is. See you next time.